All right, boys. So, if anybody feels like they're getting stuck on kind of piecing together the world around them and understanding this complex reality that we exist in, this one's going to be for you. Because no matter how hard I search, I don't see anybody effectively offering up a cohesive model or framework to understand the world around us. It's always focused in one or another camp, being either focused on the spiritual world or being focused in the material world. So basically, it comes back to an epistemic question, which is a paradox, I should say, which is science versus religion. It's probably as old as time, and having this paradox, epistemology just being a understanding, like the understanding, the seeking of understanding or knowledge. So the problem is, and what I see nobody talking about, is that if you're treating this as a paradox and you're viewing the world through one or the other lens, the chances that you ever actually arrive to a point of real understanding, it's basically zero. Because no matter which way you slice it, no matter which camp you fit into, if you're a religious person, if you're a spiritual person, if you're a very materialist person, secular person, atheist person, doesn't matter which way you slice it, there is no escape from the fact that there is an unseen as well as a seen world. So this kind of destroys atheism, in my opinion. But that's not the topic of this video today, because there's so many aspects to the world around us, to the things that we experience on a daily basis, that cannot be accounted for in a scientific only worldview. Let's not get stuck on the creation of the universe and things like that, because that's a whole nother tangent and it in itself destroys the concept. But for example, what are thoughts? What are dreams? What is inspiration? What are these concepts? These are not physical concepts. These are immaterial, conceptual ideas that appear to have origins in a dimension that we do not have physical access to. So that's kind of the basis of this whole talk today, and also an underpinning of such a useful framework that I have developed, I've seemed to stumble on, and it's allowed me to look at the world in such a less confusing manner, in a way that I can look around and actually piece things together and make sense of things, whether or not I have the answers written in front of me or not. Because a lot of knowledge is seeked, it's learned, it's taught, understandably. But there's also a certain amount of knowledge that must be gained and it must be reasoned with in one's own mind. Yeah? So I ask a question to anybody who feels like the world is purely material, yeah? And that is, what is, and actually to anybody, because what is our society and our civilization and our culture's obsession with so-called fantastical ideas, mythological ideas, such as demons, such as aliens, mythology, ancient mythology, symbology, how obsessed we are with symbology, whether you realize it or not, how crucial and how important and how powerful symbology is to the world around us and to especially movers in this world. You've got a concept called the akashic records. I'm guessing some of you would have heard and some not, which is basically almost like an etheric library that exists interdimensionally, that we can access, that we can phase shift into, tap into somehow, and receive information from. Speaking of akashic records, then you also are talking about the ether. The ether is not talked about much anymore, which I think is a gigantic mistake as far as the perpetual, the forward momentum of our society. You have the Ouroboros, which is the snake eating its own tail. A lot of you would have seen this image as well. A lot of people have this as a tattoo. This is also grappling with the the idea of the spiritual versus the metaphysical world against. It's also grappling with the idea of paradoxical truths, multiple truths being true at the same time. You've got things like even The Simpsons and their ability to predict things. If you're in the conspiracy world, you would have seen this countless times. How The Simpsons have somehow uncannily tapped into and seemingly time traveled to predict the future. That also enters in time travel. Time travel is something that we're also obsessed with as a culture. Science fiction. We're always also obsessed with these concepts of intergalactic species and everything. That kind of ties back into aliens. And then you've got the Bible itself or scriptures itself, because a lot of people get stuck on if these are purely literal descriptions and prescriptions or if they are metaphorical. But again, I think so many people are getting lost on the fact because they're trying to treat these as individual and separate and actually conflicting ideas. When in reality, the true way to understand the world around us, and the only way to understand the world around us, is to marry up those concepts. It's two sides of the same coin. You have heads and you have tails. But you have whatever the material metal is in between them, connecting them. And you can't have one without the other. If you separate them, they are no longer a coin. And that's how we need to think about the seen and the unseen world, the metaphysical and the physical. And without doing that, like the title says, you're going around blind. You are effectively walking around half blind in this world, wondering, why is this hard to figure out? Why don't these things make sense? And for good reason, to be fair, for good reason. There's also the idea of the muse. The muse being Greek, I believe it's a Greek concept where inspiration is gathered from beings, from interdimensional, you could say, beings that exist outside the physical world, where we can tap into for inspiration when it comes to things like art, music, etc. So, if we spend a little bit more time on these concepts, they all may seem to be independent and siloed from one another. But my argument is that these are not siloed or independent in any way, shape, or form. The only way I was truly able to make sense of the world around me as a 36-year-old man now, and I've been trying my whole life, this has been an obsession, it's something that I would say, especially in the past few years, but to some extent my entire life since I was 17, 18, this is something that I have been spending a huge percentage of my spare time diving into. And only within the last few years started to actually cohesively put together. Because these concepts like aliens, demons, mythology, symbology, akashic records, you got Ouroboros, which is a symbol, you've got time travel, you've got the biblical texts and their seeming metaphorical nature and literal nature at the same time, because they don't state which is which. And then you have these things that are actually right there for us every single day we're interacting with on a constant basis, which is thoughts and dreams. Well, what do you think those are? Is that physical? Is that part of a physical process? Because some dude named it a synapse and a Come on, bro. Where is inspiration coming from? Where are inventions coming from? First, a car didn't exist, and then a car existed. Where was that idea plucked out of? If you think in your own mind, if you think about your own thoughts, you think about your own desires, your own aspirations, you think about your dreams that you have at night, you're telling me that's all part of a physical process of evolution that developed billions and trillions? No, brother. I don't think anybody truly believes that. Deep down, I think there are inherent gigantic flaws in such an ideology, because there is no way to assume that every single thing in this world was created by accident. That's what it comes down to in the end. So if it's not created by accident, And there is an unseen layer of this world. You can also start to talk about psychedelic experiences as well, where people are going into these spiritual dimensions and they're coming back with the reports of the same things. So, where are they going? What is this other dimension? There you can start to talk about aliens as well. What are aliens? Are they interplanetary? No. Or are they interdimensional? Because even your biggest alien head, they leave a door open that it's actually interdimensional. They're coming out of the water, they're coming out of the sky sometimes. Where are they coming from? There's also a lot of, if you go back in time to history and reports of aliens, you see that it's heavily contingent on the spiritual world. That's how they contextualize the whole thing. They don't talk about beings from other planets. They talk about interdimensional spirits, angels, demons, this kind of thing. That's actually the origins of the whole entire concept of aliens. And if you ask me, a conspiracy guy, that's where it came from, that's where it's from, and that's where it'll always be. Because that is the origin source of everything. The spiritual realm, this point that I'm trying to drive home, the spiritual realm is the origin point for everything. Because then we're talking about God, we're talking about a creator. Then you've got your intentional mind. And where does the creator exist? Outside time and space. So outside time and space, it's not nothing, it's something. It's actually everything. It's the underpinning for everything. And that's where you can bring into the akashic records again. So again, like I mentioned, the akashic records is seen of some kind of etheric realm, etheric data bank where it houses all of the world's knowledge. And we can access it. It can interact with us and we can interact with it. And we can pluck ideas from the ether and bring them into reality through actions, physical actions. Which then invokes demons. Because if there's angels and demons, because then you've got the spiritual realm communicating with us. How? Through thoughts, through these akashic records, through the etheric realm. And if you hear whispers in your head, the thing is, we just think everything that's going on in here is ours. But did you ever stop to think, maybe no? And if you actually dive deeper, if you've dabbled around with meditation, if you've had a look into some of these concepts, which are all born from the Bible, from scriptures, by the way, just to let you know. But if you don't need to know that origin point to understand these concepts and to have explored them in your own time. Thoughts are largely, if not entirely, not yours. Because if thoughts are you, then who's the one listening? Think about that. Is the one listening or the one talking you? But I digress. The point being here, there's an endless conflict between the metaphysical and the physical world. Science, materialism, wants to posit and wants to hang their hat on everything that you can touch, bang, measure, weigh. But in reality, that can get you pretty far. The same as if you've got ultra spiritual people who don't want to look at the world around them, they can get far with that. But also you kind of insulate yourself from society. So on one hand, banking on science, it devoids you and it excludes you from everything spiritual, which is everything holy, which is everything actually good. When you dive deep enough, further enough in, you'll realize that anything good in this world is coming from the spiritual, which is a kind of fictitious word of saying God, because that is the true origin source. But there is a limitation to that, to spending all your time and energy on that, in the fact of you can still live a very happy, fulfilled life, but it will insulate you from the world around you, from the community around you to a certain extent, because most people are very focused on the world and the material. So both options have limitations. And the way to truly, cohesively, and holistically understand the world around us is by, instead of having conflict between the metaphysical and the physical, the seen and the unseen, it's to marry them up. And to start thinking about the world, considering that marriage at all times. And it will unlock a level of understanding about the world around us. A lot of the occult knowledge, the conspiracy knowledge, the stuff that's trying to piece together that's aside of the mainstream narrative, if you are interested in that, this framework is going to help you. Because, again, looking at only one side is basically walking around in this world half blind. But when you marry them up, things start to make sense. So, what's an example of that? A good example. We can go to the Simpsons. The Simpsons have apparently predicted a whole lot of things that happen in the future. And I was actually speaking with a mate of mine who's now starting to really dabble in these kind of topics. And he asked me like, but bro, how are they doing that? How are they not just predicting certain outcomes, but they're predicting the whole scene? The Donald Trump one coming down on the escalators is a big one. And it's a baffling question at first. It's like, these people aren't time travelers, are they? And let's say, if you go the conspiracy route, everything's scripted, the world around us, especially the mainstream media, heavily scripted, but that's kind of not sufficient as well. Until you invoke something like the akashic records, the ether. Because from there, you can start to understand that there is something else going on. It doesn't just have to be scripted, and it doesn't just have to be some magical time-traveling, physics-breaking concept. It can be somehow a marrying of the two. It can be, there are forces, there are beings that exist outside of this dimension, but they interact with us. And without us knowing, we also interact with them. So you can be becoming inspired and writing down a script or drawing art. And if you're tapped into the right frequency or the wrong frequency, you could be getting direct information from there, and you could be being fed information from a being or from a source, an intentional mind, a source that is feeding you information that we do not have access here in the physical realm. So that kind of marries it up, the time machine and the script. You can also be participating in the scripting of society without realizing it, but receiving that information, not from a dude in a suit, but receiving that information from a interdimensional force, interdimensional being. And that kind of thought pattern rolls into the Bible, the scriptures, because a lot of the stories seem heavily metaphorical, and some of them seem very literal. And my contention, my position on it is that a lot, if not all cases, are both, because that's the kind of force that we're dealing with here. The stitching of the reality that's happening around us, and that allows for the complexity and the synchronicity in everything that we see, that is spiritual by nature, and it's outside of our conception. The complexity and the level of orchestration is mind-bending, but it also allows for something to be two things at once, which is what the symbol of the Ouroboros represents. And of course, the Ouroboros is a pagan symbol. It doesn't have any divinity to it. But a lot of these, basically all of these symbols and this occultic knowledge, it's all pulled from the scripture itself in its original form, and then twisted and built upon or represented, etc. So what is the snake eating its own tail? What is that? And what does it represent? The question that it poses, the paradox that it poses is it killing itself? Or is it sustaining itself? With the answer being both at the same time. So obviously it's a fictitious occurrence, but if you follow it logically, the snake is eating itself and slowly becoming sustained, and then as it keeps going around, it's killing itself and sustaining itself at the same time in an infinite loop. So it represents infinity, and it represents the paradox of the physical and the metaphysical being real at the same time. Both options are real at the same time. It is killing itself, it is devouring itself, and it is sustaining itself at the same time. And I think that's true not in the sense of destruction and sustenance, but of the scriptures. These stories that seem mind-bending a lot of the time are they're metaphorical and literal at the same time. As hard as that is to grasp, because some of these stories are wild, based on the frame of view we have of the world today. In my belief, the world today is a very different place than it was thousands of years ago. And I don't buy into the mainstream historical narrative, not even slightly. Not that it's all false, but there's been lots and lots of twisting there. So I think that's deep enough in this rabbit hole for the time being. Hopefully there's been enough structure and clarity to this to open up people's mind to the need for considering two sides of the coin of this existence. Because there are two sides to this coin. No matter how much you want to close your head and close your eyes and bury your head in the sand, there are two sides. And to look at one renders you effectively useless as far as truly understanding the world around you. So that's it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Interested to hear your feedback. And I'll definitely go off in different tangents on some of these. We touched a lot of topics here, and there's definitely a lot of room to go down in some of these things. But one of the best ways to do that is to interact and let me know in the comments, and we'll go from there. Until next time, God bless.